Jeffrey Epstein was definitely a weird man, no one's denying that. But what makes it even weirder is the possession of paintings that were found at his estate after he was arrested and then killed. Died. The painting depicts former President Bill Clinton in high heels and a blue dress lounged in the Oval Office. And since Epstein had connections with the Clintons, this stirred up a lot of conspiracy theories. However, the picture, named Parsing Bill, was done as a fundraiser by the New York Academy of Art, and they had no idea that he ended up purchasing it. And one particularly weirder is called War Games. It shows former President George W. Bush Jr. with a paper airplane in his hand, with two toppled Jenga towers in front of him. The artist Ryan Clyde said both of these paintings were sold in a set, and they were sold to an attendee, and she had no idea who the attendee was or who even ended up with them. Journalist Kim Wall was doing a story on Peter Madsen and a submarine he had built. This is the last photo of Kim before she boards the submarine with Peter, and he would proceed to murder and dump her body at sea. This is the last photo of 29-year-old Spanish bullfighter Victor Barrio. These are his last moments alive before he is gored by that bull named Lorenzo on live TV. This is 31-year-old volcanologist David Johnson. He was the first to report on the Mount St. Helens eruption in Washington in 1980. This is the last picture taken before he would die from a lateral blast from the eruption, despite being 6 miles away from the initial eruption. Cheyenne Antoine on the left and Brittany Gargle on the right. This is the last selfie these two best friends took together before Cheyenne would proceed to strangle Brittany with the belt she's wearing in this picture. She claims she has no memory of this ever occurring, and she pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. So the number one rule in robbing a place is always understand what you're robbing. Derek Mosley didn't get the memo as he attempted to rob a gun shop armed only with a baseball bat and a knife. The manager then pulled out a gun on Mosley and held him at gunpoint until the police arrived. In 1955, Claus Smith attempted to rob a bank in Berlin. Like a standard bank robbery, Smith walked up to the bank teller and demanded the money. She replied with, "Do you need a bag?" His reply, "Yes, it's a real gun," let them know that he was in fact deaf, and in no time they triggered the alarm and waited as the police came to apprehend Smith. He would later go on to sue the bank for taking advantage of his disability. Darren Kempton attempted to rob a house not knowing that it had been previously burglarized, so cops were already on scene. Needless to say, breaking into a house full of cops is never a good idea, and Darren was apprehended expeditiously. Don Branshaw was a trainer at SeaWorld Orlando who on February 24, 2010, was killed by Tilikum, a trained killer whale. The audience watched in horror as the 12,000-pound orca drug her by her ponytail to the bottom, and some short time after, the pool turned red. Pierre Cleveland from Detroit was charged with murder when his 3 pit bulls escaped and mauled and killed Emma Hernandez. Pierre was apparently aware of how dangerous his pit bulls were already and regardless left them in the backyard, knowing that there was damage to the fence. Emma sustained bite marks all over her body and died at the hospital. Brian Jeffrey Griffin was swimming in the Dead Rivers in Lake County, Florida. Well, he was then attacked by a 10-foot alligator. His friends watched in horror as the alligator grabbed Brian in his jaws and submerged with him. It would take over an hour to recover him from the alligator, and although he made it to the hospital, he would die from his injuries. So you guys showed some awesome support on the first one, so definitely had to get another one up for you guys. Lane Graves was 2 years old, and in 2016, he was on a trip to Disney World with his family. Well, as Lane was playing in front of his parents, a 7-foot alligator came and snatched him up in his jaws. And although the alligator was shot and killed, Lane's body was found the next day, a couple meters from where he was taken. In November of 2012, 2-year-old Maddox Durkosh was visiting the Philadelphia Zoo with his mom. Well, she apparently lifted him up over the enclosure to get a better view, and he fell in when he leaned forward. The crowd watched in horror as the 2-year-old was mauled by about 11 painted dogs. Stephen Miller was an American wrangler and stunt double. While performing training with a grizzly bear named Rocky, Rocky attacked him, severing his carotid artery and his jugular vein, causing him to die instantly. Darwin Awards are dedicated to those individuals who improve the human gene pool by removing themselves from it in spectacular ways. Probably by far my favorite, in 1982, David Grunman decided to shoot a 20-foot saguaro cactus. Well, the arm then fell on David and killed him. Canadian lawyer Gary Hoy was demonstrating that the glass of his 24th story office window was unbreakable by crashing into it. Apparently he had done this several times before, but when he crashed into the window, it popped out of its frame and Gary fell to his death. Next we have Franz Reichelt. He developed a suit which was meant to act like a parachute, allowing him to fly. Well, he jumped off the Eiffel Tower and it didn't deploy, and not only did he have a heart attack, but he plummeted to his death. In 1992, Greg Austin Gingrich played a prank and pretended to fall over the Grand Canyon railing. Well, joke's on him because he actually lost his footing and fell to his death in the Grand Canyon. When Joe Matheny was captured by authorities in 1996, instead of putting up a fight, this 6'1", 400-pound man instead told authorities that he was a very sick man. During interrogation, Matheny went into grim detail, I should say, about the murders that he had committed. Some of them he had just been previously acquitted for, others authorities had no idea about. Matheny told authorities how his life changed in July of 1994. When he came back from a night shift as he was a truck driver, he arrived home to see that his wife had not only taken everything from the house, but also his son as well. In a drug-induced rage, Matheny went in search of his wife and child. As he was a drug user just like her, he went to spots where she would frequent. Instead, he came across Randall Brewer and Randy Piker. Both of these men were asleep. Matheny took an axe and butchered these men on the mattresses they slept on. Matheny told authorities how in the span of 7 hours, he committed 5 murders. After butchering the 2 men, he lowered 2 sex workers under the bridge and then raped and killed them as they were witnesses. A fisherman was watching and he took a steel pipe to his head as well. He told them they just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. In order to get rid of the bodies, he dumped those 3 in the river. However, because the murder weapon was taken and used in another murder, there was insufficient evidence to prove he killed the 2 homeless men, so after spending a year in jail with no sufficient evidence, Matheny was released. After being released, Matheny convinced his boss to give him a job back at the pallet factory he worked at. On top of this, he also convinced him to let him keep an eye on the property, so he gave him the key to the gates. According to Matheny, this was the perfect spot to do what he wanted to do. He invited 2 sex workers over, raped them, killed them, but then he thought about his close encounter with getting caught, and he came up with a more clever way to dispose of the bodies. Using the body parts of the women that he killed, he butchered them, froze them, and then mixed them with pork, and I'm not shitting you, he opened a burger stand and he actually served these to people. He told police that people never noticed the difference because when you mix it with pork, it tastes just the same. Matheny told authorities that whenever he needed more ingredients, he'd just go and find another sex worker, kill her, butcher her body, freeze it, and the process would start over. So whether or not anyone knew that they were consuming human flesh or they ever found out is unknown. After attempting to rape and kill a woman named Rita Kempner, she escaped and alerted authorities, and there Matheny was arrested. He was given life without the possibility of parole, and in 2007, he was found dead in his cell. Darwin Awards Volume 4. Because as long as there's stupid people, there'll never be a shortage of these. A man named Philip Contos in July of 2011, along with 500 other bikers, were participating in a protest against wearing helmets. Well, ironically enough, Philip slammed on the brakes of his 1983 Harley Davidson. It fishtailed. He basically flew over the handlebars, hit the pavement, and died from head injuries at a hospital. The coroner said that 100% had he been wearing a helmet, he would have survived, which is ironic in the fact that he was protesting wearing helmets, and that's where he died, by not wearing a helmet, if anyone didn't understand that. Gary Banning in 2012 was at his friend's apartment in Havelock, North Carolina. Well, his buddy was a mechanic and he kept a jar on the shelf. Gary, thinking it was something to drink, took a swig. To his surprise, it was actually gasoline, so he spit it out, and some minutes or hours later, authorities aren't really sure, well, he went and lit a cigarette to get rid of the taste. And I'm pretty sure you guys can put 2 and 2 together. He basically incinerated himself, and by the time cops got there, it was already too late. He had succumbed to his burns. So really an honest mistake. His buddy told him that he kept gasoline in a salsa jar, and Gary mistakenly thought that whatever the